Well, with no power, what better do than work on a clock? This clock here I got at a garage sale, and I'm not lying like most people do. This is probably the second time I've actually found a clock at a garage sale for a reasonable price. This one here, the guy told me that the spring is broken in the clock. It's got a real nice glass in it. I don't know how well you can see the colors of it or whatever on here. It's got the, I think they call that the queen or something. The face is starting to fall off. It's not ticking. But when I turn the hand, watch what happens. See, it keeps going. Does that give you a hint of what's actually going on with this clock? And the nut, or it's probably not a nut, it's a pin, taper pin, it's lost that also. So, can you figure out what's wrong with this clock before you even take it apart? More than likely, I think I know what's wrong with it. Let me take the hands off. Gotta pick up that piece. For right now, it's too dark on the floor, so I'll have to pick that piece up later. And I have extra if it disappeared, just a cone type cup that has a square hole. Let me get a small screwdriver. Oh, here's one. And this one's only held on by 2 screws. Normally there's 3, and I don't know if it's because normally everyone sticks another screw in there or what. There we go. So just as I thought, there's nothing up here. This is flung clear over. It's supposed to be right there. Let's pull this off. There we go. So the pendulum wire is broke off of, or this part here is supposed to be attached here, so it has 2 pallets that hit here, comes around, and then should hook in onto the spring itself. I have to dig around here and see if I have such an animal, which I know I do, I just have to find it. There we go. So the spring is broke. There, I see it's broke there. So it does actually have a broken spring on the time side, and the gong side works just fine. Of course, this is kind of messed up. For who had the clock, don't doubt it would be messed up. So this wire here needs to be brought around on the spring. We'll pull the pendulum off. Isn't that a beautiful pendulum? Clean that up, get a real shine to it. That's what it's meant for, to be the eye catcher. And let's see if I got a key for this. And I forgot the name of it. Let me give you a closer look at it. I'm gonna have to look at the name of what they call this systems. They even put them on the hands. What it's meant for is so you don't overwind your clock. And when it comes to the alarm, I wouldn't ever wind it up as much as you could, because who wants to listen to that thing go off for, well, it seems like it's 15 minutes, but actually only runs for about a minute or so when it's fully wound. But that's awful noisy, so that's why I wouldn't do that. This says it's a Welch clock. And on the dial, it doesn't say anything, but you can see how it's kind of wore out from being rubbed or whatever. But it does have a decently colored brass around the paper, so this clock must have been in the house the whole time. Looking at the bottom of this clock, you normally have 2 nails here and two on this end too. Normally, because the clock's so old it dries out and they become loose, normally you leave one of the nails in just because it's part of the clock, and you put a screw in the other end to pull the sideboard down to keep it in place. This here screw was ridiculous, putting it in here because it's too big. I'm sure they probably didn't even drill it because it started to split, and normally a finished nail would hold this. Square nail, and this is so wore that you can't even see it. So looking inside, the screw didn't come through and crack the board, so that's a good thing. I'm putting a zip tie on my spring. Now I can let it down. What I'm going to do is I'm going to lift the wire spring off the clicker. So that way when I go to wind it, it's going to let down and the clicker will stay out of the way. So now we can go ahead and take the nuts off. Has 5 of them. Now one thing that we're going to watch for, which maybe I've never worked on one of these clocks before, but there's a spring coil, I'll show it to you, that is underneath here. See if we can get this up without falling apart. You can see that spring coil like there. The wire comes over and it's part of the spring system of the gong. As I said, I've never come across something like that, so that's unique to me. So now that we have all 5 nuts off, we can take this apart, and I'm hoping to keep kind of everything together. I already know, as usual, this here is probably going to pull a gear out because you can't take this out. There we go. And now this will come out. You see a drop of grease or old varnished oil, something of that sort on the back of here. But considering it actually looks pretty good, it's not all, we'll call it dried out. It does have the corrosion or whatever. There's that wire I was talking about that comes over, and that's for the spring to the gong. So I did take pictures again. That's how I wanted to get the plate off without disturbing too much. Now you can see kind of where your wires are, because sometimes it gets difficult on trying to figure out what side of the gear it goes on or whatever. So this is why I say pictures are your best friend when it comes to working on a clock. So it's dirty in there, that's not bad. I'd turn my sonic or ultrasonic cleaner on, but we have no power, so this can't be cleaned another day. There's your warning pin here. And when you're putting it back together again, you want to kind of set this up to catch, if you can, catch the levers that stop it. You can make adjustments after it's back together. You just have to separate the frame, and it might be easier for you to just do that, or try to get it close as you can, see if you just happen to be lucky. It's just got, they might have oiled this clock because it doesn't look nasty, it just looks dirty. These pegs on here, pins, what do you want to call them? That's what the gong hits to make it work. And I didn't take the wires off, the spring wires. Normally you should. I kind of forgot. So on this side, the time side, it hooks on right here for the spring to hook on instead of a front leg. On this one here, it hooks onto the front leg. So that might be something you want to take a picture of, because otherwise you'll hook it here, which realistically I don't see any problem with it, but it was meant to hook over on this side. And actually it has a hole there for a taper pin by the looks of it, And so if I get that back on there, and remember, I'll stick a taper pin in there to hold that down to keep it in this area. Now, normally, if you order a spring for this side, you'd be ordering one for this side also, or at least that's how a clock shop would do it. Number one, they got to guarantee the clock, but who knows, maybe the next time this is wound, this might break. You'll have to go back in, wait, get on the waiting list again, and you're going to blame the guy that fixed your clock that the clock broke. So that's something that you might want to think about when you're changing your springs. And realistically, keep that spring, because maybe this will fit on a different kitchen clock you have or eventually are going to get, and you'll have a replacement be just as old as the one that's in the clock that isn't broke yet. Now, I'm only going to be guessing that this spring is just as long as this side over here, the gong side, because this is all the spring I got. So I'll have to deal with that, or hope for the best, I guess is the way we'll put it. So that's pretty much all I can do, except take this off and try to give the best measurement I can. And the way I do that, it's not too much of a heart attack, because this isn't, I didn't wind it up anymore either. You start working this off. I swear it's dry, it's just not wanting to slide. You get to the edge. Once you get to the edge, right where this hooks onto the clock, that loop, I like holding on to it and the whole spring actually. Now I just flick this off of here and then slowly let it open up. And there you have it. Now, neither of these have got the plate on here to hold the spring into place, so if you did have one that was holding it into place, well, actually where it is would be where you'd see it right here, and it's been pinged on, and so you can kind of pry it off with a screwdriver. When you push it back on, you'll have to re-ping it back on to hold it in place. Okay, this plate right here is what I was talking about. What it's meant for is to actually hold that spring up a little bit so it doesn't start dragging on these gears here. And if you look close enough, you'll see where they used a chisel or something to punch this to spread it over the plate to hold it. So you might take let's say a screwdriver with the blunt end and pop it back a little bit if you have to get this off, because you might be changing this arbor, and the only way to do it is to get that off of there. And otherwise you don't necessarily need that off of there to clean underneath it, because you don't care what's underneath there. But if you're the type of people that want to take your clock totally apart, then that's what you do, is take that off. Then this should be able to slip through the gear itself and be fine. You see kind of how corroded that is. I don't know that'd be rust or if that's old oil. So what I did here is I started inside and tucked the string inside and then slowly started winding it around. It's difficult at first, but once you get to where you can move these, this is what you're doing to, or at least this is what I'm doing to be able to measure how long of a spring I need. So this string measured 102 inches. So I haven't worked on this for a while because I did a different clock, but I needed to order a spring because I only had one that was, we'll say, good. I went ahead and ordered a pair, and I'll save the one that's, we'll say, good still. The thing is, remember, sometimes it's not cheap to work on these clocks, any clock. These two springs together were $39. Just saying, sometimes you gotta weigh it out. Is the clock worth it? And usually if it's an old clock, I'm gonna say yes. So I put all the movement back together again. Now I can take it apart again and get the springs installed. The reason why I put it back together again, except all the levers, is so that way I wouldn't lose my parts. Also, this spring here that holds the clicker down, I lost the spring on this side, and so I had to order a new one. Where it went, I have no idea. Let's just hope, all I need is a spring, let's just hope it just goes right on there. Looks like I have to do a little bit of bending to get it to reach over and fit into the slot of the little clicker there. I left this alone, but right here I bent it so it'd be a little bit closer to this, and now it works. Sometimes you can't get the exact parts, and so you just have to see about making them fit. I'm happy with that. Also, these springs aren't exactly the same measurement, but let's just put it this way, with some fingers crossed, it should work. So it caught. And I do believe it goes in here. Let me go look at my pictures and make sure. All back together again, and this movement seemed difficult because I couldn't necessarily get the plates down, the gears in, and the levers into place or whatever. It really took some doing. I finally got it. This is the oiler I use. I've shown it a couple other videos. This oiler, it's kind of like a plunger. This pushes in and it's supposed to drop the oil. Then when you let go, you leave it set there and it sucks it back in. But I've noticed on these, sometimes you got to shake it towards the end in order for it to get the oil start going and to let the air bubble go up inside. But I've got it all oiled, and to me it feels tight trying to get this thing to go, but it might be because I don't have any wind on it yet. Which this is the easier one here. Let's get a wind on this side here. That seems to work halfway decent. Raising up. So I guess I'm happy with that. Now all I have to do is get our Verge on here, in which this one didn't have one, so I need to find, I got a bunch of extra ones, find it, get it on here, and see if I can get that thing set up. Well, I didn't have one of these for the clock, so I had a few of them I ordered a while back, and I had to alter this in order to get it to fit, and also to come around for the pendulum. Yeah, I don't have that on right now as I keep taking it on and off until I got it to do what I want it to do. Well, with my per se homemade wire, almost not knowing what I was doing, I was able to make it. It has more of a tick sound, and I think it's because I have a bigger opening where the spring wire comes through. It's got a decent swing to it now, so I think I'll go ahead and put the face on. Again, I don't have, I have to make my own, I think, piece of metal that bends up and over in order to hit this here where it's got the groove. I bought two of them that were from Time Savers, and they're too tall, and I tried to bend them and they just broke that fast. I adjusted the hammer. Let's see. sounds the same. So I will admit it's nice to have this Welch movement repaired, running fine by the looks of it so far. Obviously I'm going to have to let it run to set the pendulum to the right speed of the clock. And of course you turn that little knob on the bottom of the pendulum down and that slows the clock down. You turn it upward and it speeds the clock up. Don't forget. And you don't have to write on the back of the pendulum because it's not a wood one like a cuckoo clock. Anyway, happy to have this thing going again. I didn't know if I could make a leader wire or not. I knew basically what they were supposed to look like and see what they look like online, as in where to put it, although I'm not sure that the speed would make too much difference. No matter where you put it, it needs to tick back and forth. It's the spring wire and the pendulum that does the speed of the clock. Anyway, all I did is wax the case. I scratched a little bit of paint splatters off from a roller, I'm going to guess. And that's how most of these clocks are, when, especially when they're older and people start getting tired of them. Anyway, for $5 for this clock, I am totally thrilled with it. Yes, I did have to buy new mainsprings for it, and no, I didn't want to pay that much, but now I have a nice clock, so I guess I can't complain too much, and the value is in the clock. Especially some of your names of clocks, such as Welch, for example, they're usually a more sought after clock, and so that's one thing you kind of want to look at when you're buying these clocks, or look at the style of the clock and see if you enjoy that, because that's the main thing. If you're keeping the clock, how much do you enjoy the looks of the clock? Anyway, don't forget to subscribe because it's free. Anyway, until next time, God bless.